This is SEON X, the FBI. And here we sit down with Special Agent Scott Hellman to talk about a number of topics, ranging from the complexity in investigating fincrime to teaming up with global partners to try and stop international fraud.
My name is Scott Hellman. I'm a supervisory special agent with the FBI. I've been investigating or managing cybercrime investigations for over 14 years, both in the Bay Area and other places around the country. The team that I manage now, we only focus specifically on what the Bureau would consider criminal cybercrime. So typically it tends to be financially motivated. There are other teams that look at national security related types of cyber investigations, but we do specifically criminal. If you look at statistics for the last many years, cybercrime has been on the rise, no question. Let's talk about maybe 2019, 2020, and 21. And we'll look specifically at one type of cybercrime called business email compromise. So business email compromise is fairly simple. As a cyber criminal, I'm going to try and gain access to an email account, typically at a business. I'm going to read through that email and look for the next big financial transaction that's coming up. And I'm going to use my access to that email to try and trick someone into deferring the funds from where they're supposed to go to a bank account that I can control. Very simple, but very, very effective. 2019, we saw about $1.7 billion in losses just from BEC alone. It's the highest number every single year. It's always the highest cybercrime that gets reported in terms of damages. Then 2020, we got 1.8 billion. 2021, a large increase to 2.4 billion. And while I don't have all of the answers as to why there's that increase, as an investigator, I can look at a handful of different reasons as to why that might be. Phishing is oftentimes, it's very commonly used as a spur for many, many different types of cybercrime. And the reason why it works and why business email compromise works is really a handful of different reasons. It's really typically three qualities in the attack that we see attackers use. Number one is creating a sense of urgency in the victims. You are late on your payment. It's really important that you get this paid today. Something along those lines. Or it could be enticing you. Hey, this is something we think you might want, a prize that you've won, something along those lines, enticing you to make an urgent choice. Two is typically some sort of change in business practice. During COVID, we've switched banks. Now, instead of paying it to bank A, we need you to pay it to bank B. And of course, I, as a criminal, control that bank account at bank B. Again, trying to get you to divert funds to a place that I want. And then the third one is possibly a sense of confidentiality. It's a slightly different variation, but I'm trusting you with this very, very sensitive task. And you can't tell anyone about it because it's very sensitive until once it goes public, you can say, but for now, I need you to do this thing. I need you to make this payment to facilitate a fund transfer, whatever it will be, right? So we're talking about three things. We're talking about urgency, we're talking about confidentiality, and we're talking about a change in business practice. And if you think about what was going on at the beginning and all throughout COVID and the pandemic, it was an immediate sense of urgency. You got to run to the store and go buy toilet paper before it gets run out, right? Or hurry up and go get your vaccine if that was something that was important for you. And then we're talking about a change in business practice with non-stop change across the board. Now it's telework, it's now you're at home instead of at work. You're using this new VPN client instead of whatever software you're using at work. Now you're using this laptop or whatever it is, a constant change. Or maybe it was this constant change of, do we use masks? Yes, we do. No, we don't. Guidance, nonstop change, and people got used to this constant change. And then also, if we're talking about confidentiality, what better way to prevent people from telling someone about an email they received by isolating them in their homes? We were all at home, and it would be all too easy if I received sort of a strange email to poke my head over the cube and say, hey, did you get this email too? It takes a little extra step for me to pick up the phone or use some tool. So I think looking at those three things, cybercriminals have been using those methods well before COVID, but the pandemic provided this perfect recipe for phishing and business email compromise to be just that much more effective. And the last thing that I could really think of regarding the pandemic is that phishing and cybercrime works really, really well. You're the most susceptible when you're not paying attention, when you're distracted by something. It's the end of the day, you've got a million emails to look at, and now You're trying to get to whatever the next thing is. And so you're racing and racing and racing. And through COVID, we had so many different distractions, from fear to whatever it was going to be. And so I think looking at that as a whole, COVID provided, again, this very strong recipe for cybercrime to be just that much more effective. What is more effective for cybercrime? Is it technical acumen or human vulnerability? I think it has to be a combination of both, for sure. Because again, if we use phishing as an example, there are many companies that use different tools to look and identify, whether it's using AI or ML, to identify, is this a phishing email or not? And the whole purpose of all of those, of course, would be to root out all phishing emails so that the end client, the person who's reading the email, never gets a phishing email. Well, so far we're not at that stage yet. And so the purpose of the tools is to reduce the number of malicious emails that end up in front of someone. And so you have that piece of it, which is important. But then also you have humans reading emails. And if there's even one email that comes through that's malicious, you have a statistical probability of someone having to be in the right state of mind to be susceptible to it. So I don't think it's one or the other. It has to be a combination of both. We certainly see attacks coming from both. Inside the US, outside the US, a wide range of different places. I'm sure if you were to look, I don't have numbers on me right now or in my head, we could probably map out and say, for whatever reason, there are more types of attacks coming from various different parts of the world. But we certainly see it coming from both within and outside, no doubt. Partnerships is really what it comes down to. We have legal attachés who sit around the world, and their sole role is to develop and maintain relationships with law enforcement in over 200 countries worldwide. And so you're correct, we don't have jurisdiction outside the United States, but what we have is strong relationships. And so when we identify whether it's a server or whether it's a subject of a cybercrime located in another country, we leverage our partnerships to help us identify the data that we need, or work with another country to arrest a subject in that other country. So it's those partnerships that really help us expand our ability to perform our investigations. What's the process for when something happens? How do we deal with it, right? And there are many processes in place depending upon the relationship we have with particular countries. There are treaties, there are different types of legal process that we can serve. Every country is a little bit different, but oftentimes it's making that initial phone call and reaching out to our partner to say, hey, whatever the problem is, there's this problem. There's a person who's there, there's a piece of infrastructure, a computer we've identified. How can we work together to solve this, right? But even when we can work through that problem, I don't know that that's necessarily getting in front of it or preventing it. It's more of a reactionary type of stance, but it's a way to solve investigations. When I was investigating my own cases, I think there's this element, it's a very intellectual challenge, because the people who are committing these crimes many times are extremely intelligent. And the fundamental question you're trying to answer in criminal cyber investigations is who did it? You typically know something about what happened, what was taken, how it happened in some capacity, but you don't know who did it. And you're looking for 1 in 7.6 billion people. That's a huge challenge. And the most exciting part is once you find that nugget of data that illuminates who did it, or if it's more than one person, of course. I think there's nothing like it. Just to have that, many of these cases take years and years of painstaking effort of collecting small digital breadcrumbs and then finding that person. Even if you're never able to actually arrest them or what have you, it's that piece of that challenge of the mystery is amazing. One of the most difficult pieces of this job is seeing the repercussion that it has on individuals. Because working in the Bay Area, many of our victims are large corporations, and certainly it has an effect on them, and it can be very, very damaging financially, but also many of them have the capability to absorb a reasonable amount of damage from cybercrime. But what most people don't think about is if you're a cyber criminal and you steal, this is financially motivated cybercrime, and you steal some amount of money, you need to launder it, you need to move it, you need to do something with it. And the way that they do that is by taking advantage of typically lonely or elderly people through a variety of other types of scams so they can get access to their bank accounts and move money. And through that process, through taking advantage, they're often scamming those lonely people as well through a variety of different means, stealing their entire life savings. And so the initial sort of breach or hack is a whole slew of people who've been taken advantage of, and their lives are completely destroyed. And we see that piece of it day in and day out, and it's extremely sad because once it happens, there's really not much to do. The money's gone, they can't recover it, and even after they've lost their entire life savings, many victims still don't understand that the person they were talking to that they thought was a love interest online was in reality a cybercriminal. They still are just fiending for a human connection. We'll continue over the years where we have the capability of, through education and technical tools, reducing certain elements of cybercrime, but criminals will find a way to circumvent various different techniques that we have. And I think if you're looking specifically at financially motivated cybercrime, underlying it's somebody who wants money. And I would posit that they want money for one of probably two different reasons. Either one, they don't have enough, or two, they're greedy and they want more than enough. And then if we're seeing a constant trend, I'm gonna guess that somewhere in there, our criminals fall in maybe one of those two different categories. And until we can look at the underlying reasons why people commit crimes in general and not just fraud and cybercrime, I think we're gonna continue to see a rise and continue to have to battle it. The question was, does law enforcement operate sort of independently and then come together as needed, or is it more of a collective? And the answer is yes, both. Depends on the case, and I think the larger the scope or scale of the case, the more likely you're going to have more of a collective or collaborative partnership occur. And so there are multiple entities like Europol or Interpol in part that serve to bring various entities together and collaborate on certain cases, but you're not going to have that in every single case. And so I think it's a little bit of both.